Hello, room. I have returned. Thanks for keeping the place tidied up, Jerry. Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially back. This is what happens when you don't do anything for 2 years. The Sonic franchise has been on a massive redemption arc lately. Last year we got the second Sonic movie in April, which was better than the first movie in almost every single way. It was sitting at the top of the list as the highest grossing video game movie of all time. That was until the Mario movie came out, but still, that's insane, man. The IDW comic series is also going pretty strong, though I haven't read that much of it, but I'll eventually catch up sooner or later. Maybe one day I can take a look at the comics. We also got the new Netflix series Sonic Prime that was released in December. Only 8 episodes have been released though. I have a few nitpicks, but it's pretty alright for the most part. And wow man, Sonic Frontiers was absolutely phenomenal. For the first time since Sonic Generations, for the first time in 11 years, we finally have a good 3D Sonic game. The new free content updates are pretty cool too. And literally everybody has been waiting for that third content update since 2006. I missed you all so much. In 2023, we got a free downloadable game on April Fool's Day called The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. I only played a little bit of it, but I honestly don't have much to say about this one. But the idea of a Sonic visual novel is pretty hilarious, I'm not gonna lie. Last but certainly not least, we got the newly announced Sonic Superstars releasing in the fall. A fully original 2D Sonic game. When was the last time that happened? Sonic Mania released almost 6 years ago at this point, and it would have been dumb not to make a follow-up, and while the game was great, it was held back by its unoriginality. It's great that we're finally getting a follow-up, but man, I was not expecting it to take this long. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good time to be invested into the franchise. This is the most relevant Sonic has been in years. I just hope that they can keep this momentum going for, preferably till the end of time. All of this has sort of reignited a flame I haven't had in me for a while. For the longest time, I've been wanting to do a Sonic retrospective of some kind. I even attempted a few times at this point, but failed time and time again. But I think that time is now. So today, we're going to be starting over from the very beginning, with the game that made Sonic the icon he is today. Before we start, I should say that I'm going to be playing the fan-made project Sonic 1 Forever. This is a project made by passionate Sonic fans that enhances the original game. This was actually built on the Taxman mobile port way back from 2013. It adds a ton of new features to the game, but I'm not really going to get into the finer details right now. I highly recommend checking it out, and obviously, yes, it is better to support the official product. So if you own the game in any way, shape, or form, by all means, go ahead. I mean, I own so many copies of this game, I kinda lost count. I have it on Mega Collection, Classic Collection on the DS, Switch, iPhone, PlayStation 3. God, I'm such a freak. Actually, I guess I own it twice on PS3 because you can unlock it in Sonic Generations, so yeah, wow. Anyways, let's get into it. This is Sonic the Hedgehog. Way back then, Sega was having a hard time trying to dethrone Nintendo's Mario and their entertainment system. Their old mascot, Alex Kidd, and their own console, the Sega Master System, weren't getting much attention. They decided to go back to the drawing board and formed a team that could create a game that could also go head-to-head with the Big N for their newest console, the Sega Genesis. A Sonic team, if you will. Some important names that worked on the game were Yuji Naka as lead programmer, who, as of right now, is behind bars. I'm not joking about that, by the way. We have Naoto Oshima as the character designer, considered the true father of Sonic. He actually recently returned to the series for Sonic Superstars. So welcome back, Mr. Oshima. Next we have Hirokazu Yasuhara as the game planner and level designer, Rieko Kodama as graphic designer, and the iconic soundtrack was done by Masato Nakamura of the Japanese band Dreams Come True. So yeah, one game development cycle later and we got Sonic the Hedgehog, which was released on June 23rd, 1991 on the Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive for those who live in other countries. Going through old concept art, we can see that there was a lot of ideas that weren't in the final product. Sega held a company-wide contest for people to design a character that could be their new mascot to rival Nintendo, and there was a lot of submissions. The ones that stood out the most were a rabbit, an egg-shaped Teddy Roosevelt-looking guy in pajamas, and most importantly, a hedgehog. All three characters were designed by, of course, Naoto Oshima. The winner was obviously the Hedgehog, given the name Sonic. The egg-shaped guy would get some different threads and become the series' antagonist, Dr. Eggman. He would get a name change in the US, being Dr. Ivo Robotnik. But eventually, these names would be united in the future games as Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik. Canonically, the Eggman part of the name was given to Robotnik by Sonic, and he decided to embrace it.
It's Sonic who named me Eggman. Except the joke's on him. I embraced the name. I made it my own. His mockery is now a name feared across the ages.
Nothing ever happened with the rabbit character, but there have been a few references here and there throughout the series' history. The Sonic Mania pre-order trailer being a good example. Sometimes I think about the alternate timeline where that rabbit was chosen. I can see Sonic running from the government, traveling through time, battling a failed laboratory experiment, and even wiping a time god from existence. But this guy? No way. More ideas included Sonic being in a band that would be used in the sound test. He was going to have a human girlfriend named Madonna. And look at this, I don't even know what's going on here. Some of these concepts would actually see the light of day in some way or another. There was that TV show where Sonic was part of a band called Sonic Underground. Gross. Vector the Crocodile would make his debut in Knuckles Chaotix. He would also be a reoccurring character throughout the series. Madonna is probably what inspired characters like Sarah from the Sonic OVA and Princess Elise from Sonic 06. So when is this guy gonna come back? In the original Japanese version of the game, our story starts on planet Earth. Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik is an evil scientist and a roboticist with an IQ of 300, and a massive ego, of course. He has his eye set on the mysterious, maybe not anymore, Chaos Emeralds. These gems of miracles are located on South Island, and he plans to use them to help him aid with his creations. And take over the world, of course. Sonic the Hedgehog also shows up on the island as well with the tornado. He is the owner of the plane after all. Sonic is a friendly adventurer with an attitude and ego as big as Eggman's, but he's always ready to help those in need when the time comes. When he arrives on South Island, he immediately knows that something is up, because all the local wildlife has been turned into robots called badniks. Eggman uses these guys for scouring for the Chaos Emeralds, and to capture more of the animals. Running across the island, Sonic must not only stop Eggman's scheme and gather the Chaos Emeralds, but free the animals in the process as well. That's basically it. Nice and simple. Until we get to later games, of course. And no, I'm not going to mention the other interpretations of the story because that's what keeps me awake at night. We then start our adventure in Green Hill Zone. Whether you want to call it infamous or not is completely up to you. Looks more soulless every time I see it. What made Sonic stand out from other games at the time was the momentum-based platforming. I really love that the game was built around that because, man, he feels great. To control, I mean. What do you think I was talking about, you sick freak? When you start moving around, you'll notice that your speed goes from a slow jog to a fast sprint. Throughout the game, there's plenty of things that could slow you down, but why let it do that when you can just use them to your advantage? The game encourages a lot of experimentation to explore the levels. For example, there's this loop with an item box on top of it with seemingly no way to retrieve it, but using the proper momentum, you can jump off this wall and look at that, you got yourself a goodie. The moveset is nothing to write home about though. You have a jump and the spin attack to take out enemies. No Sonic 2 spin dash, no CD super peel out, no 3 and K insta shield, and no drop dash from Sonic Mania either. I usually play with all those options turned on, but I decided to turn them off to keep things faithful to the original release. And wow, it feels wrong. Although Sonic's moveset is pretty bare bones, I think it gets the job done pretty well. Like any other platformer, Sonic has its fair share of things to collect as well. There's of course these item monitors that are hidden throughout stages, containing stuff like 1-ups, shields to take an extra hit, temporary invincibility, and speed shoes. The biggest priority are the rings. As long as you have one of these bad boys on hand, you can take as many hits to your heart's content. If you reach the end of the stage with at least 50 of those rings, you can access a special stage. Each one of these contain one of the 6 Chaos Emeralds. I have no clue why they changed it to 7 in Sonic 2. I don't really have much to say about these. I don't hate them, but I don't like them either. You just have to navigate to the emerald while steering clear of these gold ball things. These bumpers can get kind of annoying too, unless you can use them to your advantage. But overall, I think these are pretty easy for the most part. Sonic 1 has a total of 6 zones, which are all split up into 3 acts. Every third act ends with a battle against the Good Doctor. Most of these fights, in my opinion, are just kind of okay. Each Eggman contraption has about 8 hits with the exception of Labyrinth Zone, which doesn't require attacking him. These are pretty dang pathetic and have no challenge to them whatsoever. I could say that for all the bosses in the Genesis games actually. When we're talking about level design in Sonic 1, it's obviously weaker than the others. The game starts out really strong in Green Hill. You have a ton of slopes to go off of and your branching pathways, but the second you leave, you better be prepared for what's to come. Marble Zone. Talk about false advertising. Comparing this to Green Hill is like night and day. Branching pathways are basically gone for the most part, and there's a ton of hazards that will crush you if you're not careful. Enemy placement feels not that well thought out. You're also pushing around blocks, and when you're not, you're riding one slowly across these pools of lava, even though some of these can be avoided. Yeah, this will be sort of a common thing you'll see with the level design of Sonic 1. It's very inconsistent. Spring Yard Zone is a bit better than Marble Zone, but it has its fair share of problems as well. There's these elevator sections, which are pretty slow, and sometimes there's these pits with a bunch of bumpers that feel completely random at times. And yeah, the branching pathways are back, but it doesn't feel as fleshed out as Green Hill. Then we got Labyrinth Zone, or as I like to call it, I guess the best way to put this is that it feels like the underground parts in Marble Zone, just slower, I guess. I'm glad the later games improved upon the idea of water levels, because this zone is just absolutely horrid. Starlight Zone is one of my personal favorites. Branching pathways are back, which is nice, and I really like the seesaw gimmick that's placed throughout the level. It's even used in the boss fight. This one's pretty great for the most part. Last up, we have Scrap Brain Zone. This level is full of different gimmicks. Some are good, some are not. You got your rotating platforms, conveyor belts with saws, flamethrowers. There's also these spinning things as well, I don't know what to call them. Though it's heavily flawed, for a final level, it's pretty alright. I also like how the backgrounds are different in each act. Act 1 has you outside of Eggman's facility, while Act 2 takes place inside of it. Act 3? Yep. Well, this one ain't too bad as the others, as long as you know that shortcut. Despite popular belief, I'm not really into pixel aesthetics. I got this Mario shirt with the original 8-bit sprites not too long ago and regretted it like a week later, thinking how much better I would look in literally anything else. But the Sonic series is probably the only exception to this. These games are 16-bit, and I absolutely love the way these games look. Like, putting this next to Super Mario World, which is also a 16-bit game, is insane. The Super Nintendo could handle 256 colors simultaneously, while the Sega Genesis could only handle 61. And I think Sonic's world design looks leagues better than Mario's in my opinion. If the Genesis Sonic games taught me anything about art, is that it's not always about having more colors, but rather what you do with them. Though one problem I will say about Sonic 1's art design is that it seems to mostly favor darker color palettes for its zones. Obviously, that's not the case for Green Hill, of course. Though the other games have fixed these problems, I still can't help but love the locations of Sonic 1. With the exception of Green Hill, we rarely ever see these other locations return, and that's a darn shame. Now, moving on to the soundtrack. I actually forgot to talk about it last time, but honestly, I don't have much to say about the music in this game in particular. I mean, yeah, it's good. No disrespect to composer Mr. Nakamura, but if I want to listen to these tracks, I don't really like listening to the original versions. When I force myself to listen to the Green Hill theme, I usually prefer listening to one of the newer versions from Generations or Mania. I do think it's a good soundtrack though. Spring Yard and Starlight Zone are definitely my favorites, but yeah, that's basically all I got to say about it. Now we move on to the final boss. The final encounter with Eggman in this game is definitely one of the weaker final bosses in the series, but for the first game, it's alright. You don't have any rings during this boss fight. You have to not only avoid getting crushed, but avoid these purple energy beams as well. Once you defeat Dr. Eggman, your ending will differ depending on whether you got those Chaos Emeralds or not. In the true ending, Sonic uses the Chaos Emeralds to restore South Island to its former state. He then heads off on the next adventure that awaits him. And that is Sonic the Hedgehog. People say it's a pretty short game, but that's okay. I think the game has some replay value, making it a perfectly average-sized game. I'm sorry for saying that. Still, Sonic 1 has a lot of design flaws that make the game dwell in comparison to other games in the series, but at the end of the day, the game set the grounds for what the series would become in its 30-plus year history, and for that, I think it definitely deserves the respect. Now if you would excuse me, I gotta go get myself a bite to eat. Nah, Pizza Hut though, they still got beef with me.